The Metroid Prime Trilogy was a rumored Switch game for literally the console's entire existence, which might have left a few people disappointed that Nintendo gave us a standalone release for just the first game all by itself. But even though the Prime Trilogy on the Wii in all its steelbook glory is still clearly the better deal, all things considered, I still don't think a standalone release for the first game on the Switch is a bad thing at all, and I'll tell you all about it after my Emmy-nominated intro. Alright, so like everybody else, I thought the Prime Trilogy was coming to the Switch rather than just the first Prime game. Not because leakers who were occasionally right in their guesses said so, but because whether it be by reminding old fans why they love the games in the first place, or by teaching new ones what all the fuss is about, it just seemed like the perfect way to get people excited for the fourth game. But even though I was a little bit surprised to only see a remaster for the first game pop up in the Switch all by itself, it kinda made sense to me after thinking about it for like 5 minutes. I mean, after all, the trilogy was only ever released outside of Japan to begin with, whereas in the land of the rising Toriyano, they only got the first 2 games as standalone Wii releases, just like Pikmin 1 and 2. Like, I don't mean to sound like a bootlicker for a billion-dollar company, because obviously I'd love for the Switch to have gotten the full trilogy on one cartridge with a neat little steelbook, but the trilogy was kind of a crazy good deal to begin with. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that the remaster for the first game on the Switch only being $40 is still a pretty good deal. Well, maybe not for Bam Margera anyway.
It was $40. I didn't want to buy it.
I'm sorry, I can't resist recycling that joke that only I think's funny anytime something costs $40. But anyway, I don't plan on picking Prime 1 up myself, cause I played it not that long ago, and honestly, I really don't like collecting for consoles where large chunks of the library consist of games with massive Day 1 updates, but for anyone who hasn't played Metroid Prime in a long time, or even ever at all, I think you'll definitely get your money's worth, since this game definitely holds up pretty well, and still looks surprisingly good in my opinion. Once people finish up with Prime 1, though, a lot of people would probably argue that it makes sense to put 2 and 3 out, with 4 being the grand finale after like a year or so, and I wouldn't say that I personally don't want that to happen or anything like that. However, I could definitely see the argument against it. I mean, first of all, the idea is to get people excited for Prime 4, I'd imagine, but the general consensus seems to be that Metroid Prime is one of the rare occasions in video game history where the first game's considered to be the best, even though Prime 2 and 3 are solid fun times. And if the first game is the best, then why risk ruining the excitement by reminding fans of the diminishing returns? That may be a harsh way to put it, but it does get my point across that you don't want to burn fans out before the main game everybody's been waiting for. I mentioned this in another video, but most movie theaters didn't play Ghostbusters 2 in 2016 before Afterlife came out. They just played the first one, and the same goes for other long-awaited sequels like Jurassic Park, although, personally, 2 was by far my favorite, because apparently I'm an uncultured swine, I guess. But I mean, how are we supposed to miss Metroid Prime if we get 4 games, presumably in a year or so? And even if Primes 2 and 3 are better than 1, then you can still argue to jump straight to 4, so people will think 4 is even better than it is with all the improvements made over the game most recent in people's memories. I happen to fall into the camp of people who think the first one's the best, though, of course. You know what, just because I'm saying I get it if Nintendo doesn't put Primes 2 and 3 out before 4, doesn't mean that I don't want them to, because while people may hate ports, I think they're harmless, even though I do obviously prefer new and original games just about every time. If I were to be named the dictator of Nintendo and given the choice tomorrow, though, then I'd say that it probably makes better business sense to hold off on Primes 2 and 3 until after 4, because regardless of when they come out, they're still gonna sell out the ass, but even if everybody loves them as much, or even more than the first one, 3 games right before a 4th will run the risk of burning fans out without fail right before the most important game. I mean, usually don't have 3 appetizers before your meal, but what people will do is have an appetizer, main course, and then maybe dessert. Sure, some people might be too full for the dessert, but wouldn't that be better than being full from the appetizer and dessert and not having any actual appetite left for the meal? Well, that's the risk you run if you bring the full Metroid Prime trilogy to the Switch before 4, but again, though, I personally don't care either way, since I'm not in charge of Nintendo, at least not yet anyway. Besides, I know Metroid games do have stories, but it's not like Prime 3 had some kind of a crazy cliffhanger ending or anything like that. Hell, it's right in the middle of the Metroid timeline, so I highly doubt the story in Prime 4 is going to heavily depend on people having played the first 3 games. Especially if they're games that came out between 1 and 2 decades ago. If Retro Studios were smart, and they are, then they'd create an entirely new arc in Samus' story that'd be a perfectly fine place for anybody to start. And the Switch sold well over 100 million consoles, and Prime 4 has been in development for like 6 years technically, so there's a lot of anticipation for this game, whether the developers at Retro like it or not. So basically, this is metaphorically the best time ever to create new Metroid fans. I know I could have used the word literally right there, but using that word correctly is overrated, so I decided to use metaphorically incorrectly for once. Anyway though, the goal is to make new fans while also selling as many copies of Metroid Prime 4 as humanly possible, then all you need to do is have Prime 1 as an appetizer to build hype and get fans ready, and once Prime 4 is pretty much said and done, then you could see if fans still want Primes 2 and 3 as dessert. Again, I don't personally care, but this is what I'd do, and while I'm not predicting it with any kind of certainty, it wouldn't surprise me if Nintendo thinks so too. So don't get upset if Primes 2 and 3 don't come out in the near future, since it won't be because Nintendo hates you. It'll just be because I want to set Metroid Prime 4 up for success after botching it on the first attempt, although I'm sure Nintendo does in fact hate all of us. Anyway, that's all for today, but if you got a kick out of my incoherent rambling and disturbing imagery though, then you should check out this video I made about the pros and cons of gaming before the internet, but if you'll excuse me though, I gotta go testify against my dad under oath to put his ass back in jail. Later.